Chapter 201. On the high platform of the city wall, the wind was freezing cold. Not far from the city, there were armies of fierce and powerful people, majestic and awe-inspiring, surrounding the peaceful area of with a covetous eye. Qin Mu stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the fierce division below, with a gleam of brilliance in his eyes. Due to his knowledge of distributing the Bible of the dead everywhere, there was also a strong smell of death among the army below. This means that the army of the Pharaoh Set has also studied and recruited some necromancers. After the war starts, there may be strange sights such as the undead reviving and the dead crawling up again. Qin Mu was looking forward to seeing this scene. The melodious and vast sound of war drums rang out, and a strong atmosphere of murderous awe filled the world. The war has begun. When Pharaoh Set's voice, as cold as ice for 10,000 years, rang out, 100,000 troops rushed straight to the city wall with endless murderous momentum. Qin Mu felt as cold as falling into an icy cave just by standing here. Countless troops swarmed in, charging with weapons in hand. The earth trembled, thick smoke rose, and a cold light flashed. In the army, there were countless corpses and evil spirits, black fog and death everywhere. Qin Mu quietly looked at the magnificent battlefield, as well as the endless killing and bloodiness. The city is not big, but the city walls are loaded with dozens of medium and high-level magic arrays of the magic goddess Isis. As the enemy began to climb the city wall, an evil aura spread, trying to corrupt the stones on the wall, and complex magic lines flashed with brown light. Multiple earth spike magic arrays were activated, and extremely sharp earth spikes were extremely hard, piercing through the city walls like steel needles and piercing the enemy. With every flash, countless enemies' bodies would be pierced, and their broken limbs and debris would fall from the city walls. After several charges, the enemy suffered heavy losses and was hit and destroyed by various magics. The battlefield was filled with flames, hail, thunder, earth spikes, rolling stones, and they firmly blocked the enemy's offensive. On the city wall, the guards couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Qin Mu didn't think much of it. In the mythological world, confrontation and war between mortals did not have much significance. The final victory or not will only be determined by the gods. We will still have to watch the war between Set and several goddesses later. Qin Mu was not sure which side would win. However, what is certain is that in the world of Western mythology, goddesses are generally no match for male gods. This may be due to differences in status and gender, or it may be due to differences in the field of priesthood. Qin Mu was not particularly optimistic about the two goddesses invited by the magic goddess Isis. There are 3 goddesses, although there are a lot of them, the quality doesn't seem to be that good. He could clearly feel that except for the magic goddess Isis, the strength of the other 2 goddesses was slightly inferior. The 9 pillar gods are equivalent to the main gods, and most of the other gods are 1 level lower, or 2 or 3 levels lower. The other 2 goddesses were obviously a level lower than him, and Qin Mu was afraid that they would be knocked down with just 2 punches. It's not impossible. After all, Set is the god of war and desert, and one of the 9 pillars of gods. He is powerful and has boundless power. Last time, the 2 goddesses who were part of the Ennead were not his match. This time, there were only 2 secondary goddesses, and it was obvious that they were not enough either. Suppressing the thoughts in his mind, Qin Mu continued to watch this epic war. In the mythological world, such a grand scene is rarely seen. He always went to the Western world, where a city-state was a model of a country, and the number of people involved in a war was not particularly large. It's nothing like now, where hundreds of thousands of people can be involved in any move. Looking at the continuous replenishment of troops in the rear, there may be tens or even millions of people. Not to mention the dead soldiers, their bodies with severed fingers and remains were resurrected and continued to be used as soldiers. He died and lived again, lived and died again, until he was beaten to pieces, then turned into ashes and floated in the sky. After continuous attacks day and night, the magical positive energy in the city is about to be exhausted. At the order of the general defending the city, the magic legion of the cult worshipping the magic goddess Isis set out. The magicians, dressed in white robes, with calm faces and stern eyes, all came to the city wall, chanted spells and launched an attack. They had a large number of people, but the opposing army had even more. All kinds of magic were released from their hands, colorful and gorgeous, and smashed towards the enemy with dangerous light. Although they launched their attack very quickly, Set's army was even more ferocious and brave, and rushed forward without fear of life and death. When the first warrior rushed up to the city wall, it meant that danger had arrived and the close combat period began. Sure enough, one soldier after another built a human ladder and rushed up. They held long swords in their hands, their eyes were bloodshot, and they rushed forward with endless hostility. Qin Mu killed 2 enemies who had just rushed up to him with one sword, and then he retreated behind him nimbly. Not fear, nor dread. He came to a nearby stone house and shouted in a deep voice, "My brave warriors, it's time to show your strength." As soon as he finished speaking, the stone house was suddenly pushed open, and a group of tall and burly giants walked out of it. Every step they take seems to cause the city walls to vibrate. Their 3-meter-tall bodies and layered muscles create a strong sense of oppression. Those soldiers who were like mad and affected by Set's warfield were shocked when they saw this and woke up from their crazy killing. Their brains are affected and don't work very well, but they are not really brainless. Seeing this burly giant, they quickly retreated, fearing that they would be the last to evacuate. "Kill, kill, kill, for the glory of the goddess!" An extremely huge giant roared. The air around him trembled at his voice, and the earth shook because of him. This is Qin Mu's greatest masterpiece, the strongest among the giants. Qin Mu named him the Hulk, hoping that he could really be as strong as the Hulk. The Hulk did not disappoint. After arriving at the battlefield, he single-handedly supported the defense of a city wall. The Hulk is very powerful. Although he has not reached the level of demigod, he is invincible under the demigod realm. The ordinary soldiers who climbed up were caught by him like chickens, and they were twisted and deformed like a pretzel with just a little force. The flesh was twisted, the bones were broken, and the bright red blood flowed all over the ground, as if forming a sea of blood. Every soldier who climbed onto the wall was terrified and bloodshot when he saw this scene, as if he had arrived in hell. The other giants are slightly weaker in strength, but they are still capable of holding their own against 10,000. Standing on the city wall puts tremendous pressure on the soldiers rushing. Over. Chapter 202. The sky was filled with flames and smoke rose everywhere. Blood and flesh were flying everywhere, corpses were piled up and the air was filled with an indelible smell of blood. Qin Mu looked at his masterpiece and was very satisfied. This was a natural killing machine. Looking at other places on the city wall, in addition to ordinary soldiers and magicians, there are also some strange creatures. Those creatures are extremely wild and have great lethality. There is an agile and swift black cat. Every jump, every twist of its body, and the sharp claws on its hands will take away a life. There were also groups of black poisonous scorpions that gushed out like a tide and attacked the enemy in dense masses. They are not very strong, but there are huge numbers of them. The stings on their bodies are extremely poisonous. Once stung, you will feel excruciating pain and lose your life quickly. But soon, they all encountered restraint from their natural enemies. After death, the corpses that were resurrected stood up shakily and continued to fight with their claws and fangs bared. The black cat and the scorpion were no longer as powerful as they were at the beginning. Their lethality was greatly reduced and they were beaten back step by step. Qin Mu shook his head. This is the uniqueness of the species. The black cat takes a swift and agile route and has great lethality, but its defense and strength are too weak. The same goes for the scorpion, which deals poison damage. Once the enemy becomes a creature that is not afraid of toxins, it immediately loses its original strength. Unlike the giant created by Qin Mu, who can carry and fight, has great endurance, and has no major shortcomings at all. Qin Mu was on the battlefield, waving his arms and commanding casually, looking very comfortable. He was not particularly concerned about this war. He only thought about getting benefits. As for how to obtain the benefits, the war needs to enter a stalemate and defeat stage. By then, he can take the opportunity to put forward his own demands and gain more benefits. If I use all my strength now, it will only attract the enemy's attention. There are no benefits, but a lot of dangers, which is not what he wants. Day after day, day and night rotate. 5 days passed, the war was raging, countless people died and were injured, the bloody smell was tangible, corpses were everywhere, it was horrifying. Qin Mu sat in a cool place, with all kinds of fresh fruits, melons, candied dates on the table, tasting them at will. He seemed to be here just for vacation, which was in stark contrast to the desperate struggles of others. "Sir, General Carlson asks you to come over." A guard ran over and said respectfully. Qin Mu lowered her eyes and said nothing, eating the fruit quietly. After a while, he spoke. "Go back and tell your general that my strength has not yet recovered. Don't bother me if you don't have anything to do, and don't come to me if you have something to do." After saying this, he continued to lie down, looking as if all was peaceful and tranquil. The guard had an unpleasant look on his face and his lips moved slightly, but in the end he didn't say anything. Instead, he turned and left. Qin Mu simply ignored this so-called general. Letting him go would only be an attempt to exploit his own labor force, so he certainly wouldn't be that stupid. Eminem's situation is not good and he is in a suppressed position in this war. We don't have the advantage in numbers, nor can we match their methods, so we are far behind. If it weren't for Qin Mu's 100 giants who resisted stubbornly on the front line and intercepted those fearless soldiers and undead, the defense line would have been broken long ago. But as time goes by, even 100 giants can't support the overall situation. Giants also need to rest, they will bleed if they are injured, and they will die. Qin Mu would have to expend his own strength to heal them from time to time, and if one died, he would resurrect one from the other soldiers for transformation. However, after such a long period of war, the giants who were transformed and trained are extremely powerful. Qin Mu also made various improvements to it, such as adding fangs and claws, covering its body with hard scales, and installing a steel needle on its tail. Directly shape them into human-shaped monster giants. They have the excellent characteristics of various animals, perfectly combined together to form the most terrifying killing machine. But even so, M's soldiers suffered countless casualties, and were struggling to hold on and were on the verge of collapse. This is also the reason why the general guarding the city sent people to seek help from him. But Qin Mu was not willing to work for nothing, and kept shirking his responsibilities and hiding his abilities. After all, if others knew that he could create such monsters at will, with no limit on the number of 100, they would only do everything they could to beg him and force him. Qin Mu looked up at the sky. The scorching sun was covered by a thick evil spirit, and the whole ground was filled with murderous aura. With so much war and killing energy accumulated, the gods on both sides should be unable to sit still. Qin Mu murmured. As the god of war and desert, Set is in charge of the powerful areas of killing and war. Now the war is at a stalemate, with fighting happening every day and countless casualties, which provides him with countless strength. As for the magic goddess, she is well versed in the field of magic and can perform many methods, but they all take time to set up. Because of this, the gods on both sides could not hold back and none of them took the initiative to attack. However, as time goes by, the probability of the gods taking action will become greater and greater. Qin Mu waited slowly on the side, wondering when they would fight. When they really start fighting, he can also observe closely and see how big the gap is between the strength of himself, a demigod, and that of a real god. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. There were mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and debris everywhere, as if it was soaked in a pool of blood, and the earth was dyed scarlet. Laugh. A cold and violent aura appeared above the earth. A terrifying supreme being suddenly appeared, blocking out the sky and the sun, and grabbed towards the city wall with an extremely terrifying figure. His arms were like giant pillars supporting the sky, emitting thick black air, which was filled with the aura of tyranny, cruelty, bloodiness, and killing. He was ready to break down the city wall and rush into the city of Am. This majestic and tall being is none other than the god of war and desert, the second-generation pharaoh Set. He had accumulated so much strength from so many days of war that his strength had already reached its peak. Every move he made was earth-shattering and devastating. When a powerful blow mixed with supreme tyrannical divine power hit the city wall, a series of exquisite magic circles emerged inside the wall. The magic circle exudes a dazzling light, extremely gorgeous, with countless rays of light floating in the void, forming a series of defensive magic circles. These defensive arrays are all advanced arrays, interconnected and mutually supportive, and their defensive capabilities have reached an unprecedented level of strength. As the two collided, a terrifying wave swept across the entire place, and many mortals who were close to them died with blood spurting out of their facial features. Qin Mu also quickly dodged and hid to the side when he saw this, unwilling to take it head on. Chapter 203. The might of the Lord God can destroy the heaven and earth and is unstoppable. Several gods also discovered that the waves of their attacks were too powerful. They dodged and several rays of divine light flashed and flew into the sky. It was the first time that Qin Mu intuitively felt the power of the Egyptian gods. He is not at the same level as these two main gods. However, on his side, the other two secondary goddesses were fine. Although Qin Mu felt that he could not defeat them, he could still deal with them with his own means. Think about it this way. His strength is roughly equal to that of a lesser god. Thinking of this, Qin Mu couldn't help but feel a lot happier. Kill the duck, and you will achieve great success. Come on, PK Chuman. The gods have left. Now it is our fourth disaster battlefield. Everyone, charge! After paddling for so long, it's finally our turn. There was a commotion, and a group of undisciplined players appeared outside the city and rushed in. They had been hiding for a long time when the two armies were fighting, just waiting for this opportunity. This war lasted for nearly half a month, with heavy casualties on both sides. Now that the gods had left, it was the best time for them to show themselves. As players, they have many different methods and tricks. Some practice magic, some learn the knowledge in the Bible of the dead, and some rub bombs, machine guns, and grenades with their hands. There were some players who married and had children. Over a long period of time, they gave birth to countless offspring who formed an army and rushed over together. For a moment, they rushed up and killed them. Seeing that they were coming in full force, Set's army simply created a bypass path for them to easily reach the top of the wall. At this time, the city wall was already littered with corpses and debris, and ashes piled up like a mountain. There was no need for any other means to climb. Just speed up and you can climb up easily. Brave warriors, it's time to show your courage to defend our country. The general in golden armor stood on the city wall, looking dignified and giving orders with sharp eyes. At the command, the remaining soldiers stood on the city wall fearlessly to resist the attacks of the players. Soon the fighting began and blood flowed once again. Qin Mu saw this scene and smiled slightly. When the battle started, he found that there were not many players. How could the fourth scourge be afraid of war? There is only one possibility: they are waiting for the opportunity. After all, they are not strong enough to defeat the indigenous people, and they won't get much benefit from a head-on confrontation. Their numbers do not make up the majority. Among the more than 100 mythological worlds, the Egyptian mythological world does not account for a large proportion, not to mention that they are distributed in every corner of the world. In addition, they have no gods to protect them, no background or backing, so their lives are not actually very good. They will be reborn after death, but a long time will pass after rebirth, which is not in their interests. Therefore, players will just lurk aside and wait for the opportunity silently. They will only take action after the war between the two sides has started and the fighting is out of control. Only in this way can they gain more benefits. This is indeed the best time. Qin Mu looked at their backs as they charged, trying to figure out who was leading all this, but unfortunately he couldn't tell. Such a big plan must have a leader who is resourceful and capable. Qin Mu waved his hand and began to send his giant army up again. Although they are all his own people, they are in different camps and have different positions, so Qin Mu can easily attack his own people. Under the attack and defense of the giants, the players' unstoppable momentum was interrupted. However, the players are much more knowledgeable than the indigenous natives. After determining the strength and methods of the giants, they came up with various strategies. Some players used magic to turn the earth into quicksand, trapping the giants. Some players threw grenades into the giant's mouth. The grenades exploded in the giant's stomach, blowing it into pieces. Others used the cultivated scarabs to rush directly into the giant's anus and eat up all of the giant's internal organs. Before long, the giants suffered some casualties. The players rushed in like wolves and tigers and started burning, killing and looting. They are mercenaries serving Pharaoh Set. After occupying the high ground, most people were extremely excited. Qin Mu didn't pay much attention to these players, he just transformed a few soldiers nearby into war giants. 100, neatly arranged, no more, no less. He doesn't really want to risk his life. Now that the war between gods has begun, he is ready to wait. When the war between gods is over, all disputes will be resolved with the victory or defeat. If Pharaoh Set wins, Qin Mu will use shape-shifting to change his identity, enter Set's camp and enjoy the fruits of victory. If the magic goddess Isis wins, he will still be the winner and receive the reward from the magic goddess Isis. His real idea is to have the best of both worlds and be ready to switch camps at any time. However, on the secular battlefield, M's situation collapsed severely, it could be said that it was shaky and in a mess. But at this moment, more than a dozen short figures suddenly rushed out from behind and rushed onto the battlefield like cheetahs. They are agile, swift, powerful, and invincible. With their joining, M's morale boosted greatly, sweeping away the previous decadence. Son of God, it was the Son of God who took action. Hold on, everyone. The great gods have not abandoned us. The sons of God have the blood of great gods flowing in their veins. They will surely lead us to victory. Countless soldiers made a deafening sound that resounded through the sky. Even the wounded soldiers couldn't help but get their blood boiling after seeing this scene. They picked up their weapons and returned to the battlefield to fight again. Qin Mu looked at all this in surprise. These little guys really exceeded my expectations. Looking at Horus, the leader, leading his delicate brothers and sisters to resist the players. Although they are young, they are not afraid of fighting. In the players' wars, the noble blood flowing in the gods gave them powerful strength. Even though they were born not long ago and not yet fully grown up, the players are still no match for them. With the Son of God and the soldiers in high spirits, they directly repelled the players. What a shame, we were defeated by a bunch of little brats. Help! Have these kids taken hormones? I can't beat any of them. Damn it! The mummy dead pool I created was torn into pieces by them with one hand. The players complained bitterly, fighting and retreating at the same time, and those who retreated late were directly killed on the battlefield. Qin Mu stood on a high platform not far away, watching all this quietly. Who would have thought that in the end it was a group of children who saved the battlefield? Chapter 204. Something's wrong. Why are there so many children of gods? Shouted a player who is well versed in Egyptian mythology and legends. This is unscientific. Gods have to use science to give birth to children. The first pharaoh Osiris had his pee eaten by a catfish, yet he was still able to give birth to children. Isn't this metaphysical enough? A player retorted while running. You know nothing. After the pharaoh Osiris was resurrected, he and the goddess of magic Isis should have only had one child. That child is Horus, the third pharaoh. But now the kids have their own basketball team. Tell me if this is outrageous or not. Damn, I wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't told me. She really gave birth to a lot. Even rabbits can't give birth to as many as she does. If the magic goddess Isis and her husband had more children, we would be doomed. How come they are so fertile? Do they have some secret recipe for having children? Listening to the player's words, Qin Mu also fell into deep thought. How could there be so many? Some gods do give birth to a bunch of offspring in their lifetime, but the quality is not very good. But why did the magic goddess Isis and her husband give birth to so many high-quality divine offspring? Qin Mu lowered his eyes in deep thought, but the next moment, he was stunned and his eyes flashed, as if he had forgotten about it. It is normal for gods to have many children. Now the main thing is to wait for the war between the gods to end. Qin Mu broke off one of his slender arms and transformed into a majestic flying eagle, heading towards the battlefield of gods above the 9 heavens. He wanted to watch from close up, but was afraid of being drawn into the horrific war among the gods, so he separated a portion of his flesh and blood and turned it into his own eyes so that he could watch. The great rock spreads its wings, leaps 1,000 miles, and soars into the sky. As we climbed higher, the clouds became fewer and fewer, and the scene below became smaller and smaller, like a model ant, blurry and unclear. After flying for a while, a strong sense of crisis appeared in Qin Mu's mind. He attached part of his soul consciousness to the eagle, and could feel all his perceptions synchronously. For example, the whistling sound of the wind when flying, the slippery feeling of penetrating the clouds, the suffocating feeling of the thin air, etc. But for Qin Mu, these are not a problem. His shape-shifting technique can adjust the structure of his body at will. All deficiencies and difficulties can be adjusted. Qin Mu raised his eyes, spread his wings and soared around the battlefield, dancing and circling non-stop. The heaven and earth shook, winds and clouds surged, the war between gods was extremely terrifying, and any attack could shake the void. The void is distorted, and the sun and moon have no light. Countless flashes of magic exploded and shot out, like a volcanic eruption or a tsunami, with overwhelming power, shaking the universe and rushing in all directions. This is an attack from the magic goddess Isis. The two goddesses on the side, as auxiliary gods, transformed into beasts, a bull and a scorpion, wandering around Set, trying to find a flaw to attack. The situation seems very dangerous, but Pharaoh Set, the god of desert and war, has immeasurable power. He just stood there and the sky and earth changed color, as if it had turned into a bloody hell on earth. The aura around Seth was icy and chilly, like ice that had not melted for thousands of years. He had a head of jet black hair draped over his shoulders, and his deep eyes seemed to contain endless murderous intent and cruelty, covering up his otherwise handsome face. With a slender figure and a straight back, he blocked all the attacks from the magic goddess Isis with a single move of his hands. He did not take the two lesser gods seriously, treating them as nothing, showing absolute confidence and strength. My dear sister, if you are willing to agree to become my queen, I will let go of your child with Osiris. Seth's deep eyes were blood red, but when he looked at the magic goddess Isis, they became a little clearer. As long as you marry me, you will be the most noble woman in the world, worshipped by millions of people. There was such domineering and toughness in his tone. He was determined to obtain Isis, the goddess of magic. Seth knew very well that in this world, only the magic goddess Isis was worthy of him and could become his queen. The other goddesses were much inferior to him in status and strength, and he was such a proud male god that he simply looked down on them. Seth, my brother, you are too delusional. Even if you become the pharaoh, I will not follow you. The magic goddess Isis looked at Seth with cold eyes. Stop daydreaming. You won't be able to stay on the throne of Pharaoh for long after you obtained it through underhanded means. Among the 9 gods, all of them are very dissatisfied with your behavior. The great sun god Ra has issued a decree that once my child Horus grows up, he will take your place and become the new pharaoh. The tone of the magic goddess Isis was cold, full of dissatisfaction with Set. If she hadn't been so ambitious, how could she have caused her husband's death and entered the underworld? Nowadays, it is very difficult for her as a mother to take care of so many children. All these sins were caused by Set, the god of war. Thinking of this, he attacked with even greater ferocity, using all kinds of high-level magic to strike down like a rain of pear blossoms. Hail, lightning, fire, thunder, all kinds of elemental laws come together to form a terrifying attack. The sky and the earth were turning upside down, the sun and the moon lost their light, and the space was shaking constantly. Seth smiled coldly, his lips slightly hooked, his eyes full of disdain. These tricks have no effect on me at all. After saying that, a strange wave rippled out from between Seth's brows, and scarlet light enveloped everything. When the scarlet light flickered, it was like amber blocking Seth's way, covering the magic flying towards him. Dozens of powerful magic spells flashed with colorful lights, but they entered the scarlet amber light, as if time had stopped, and they remained motionless. Qin Mu watched the battle in mid-air, his eyes lit up. With his extensive knowledge, he could see that Set had used some unknown method to imprison and eliminate the magic of the magic goddess Isis. As long as any magical attack enters the range of scarlet amber, it will be ineffective. With this cheating ability, it's no wonder that Set can defeat the magic goddess Isis and his original wife. This can be said to be a complete control skill. Once it starts in a war, the enemy will be defeated immediately. The god of fire Hephaestus also has a similar ability, but he can control all weapons so that they will not harm himself. Seth's abilities are similar in nature. Qin Mu suddenly thought that if he could obtain Set's flesh and blood, he might be able to master his ability. Chapter 205. He quietly flew to the side of Hathor, the goddess of love, and the scorpion god, and whispered, "Two beautiful goddesses, his ability is very powerful, but he is not invincible. As long as you have no desire to fight in your hearts, you can break his war field." What Qin Mu said was very idealistic, but very true. The war realm is very good at restraining killing and fierceness, so most attacks will be controlled as soon as they enter the realm. In order to break it, one can only restrain the murderous thoughts and intentions in one's heart. After hearing this, the two goddesses indeed frowned. This kind of thing is simply impossible. Even gods cannot control the myriad thoughts in their hearts. The goddess of love Hathor said helplessly. It's not like she hasn't thought about it, but it's simply impossible. Apart from using supreme divine power to break through Set's war domain, only the sacred domain of Osiris, the god of fertility, can restrain Set's war domain. The scorpion god also nodded, and the tail sting behind him waved in the air, waiting for Set's weakness like a spirit snake. Qin Mu smiled and said confidently, "I have a way to change your mind and make you fall in love with Set in a short time and go crazy for him. You can charge at him in the name of love and kill or injure him." After saying this, he looked quietly at Hathor, the goddess of love, and waited for her reply. The goddess of love Hathor gritted her teeth and said as she watched the goddess of magic Isis being defeated and Set pressing forward step by step. "Okay, I'll believe you this time." Hathor's sapphire eyes radiated a firm light. She also really disliked Seth. Most gods do not have a very good impression of Set, simply because he represents desert and war. The desert will destroy all life, and war is the source of all evil and disasters. Qin Mu looked straight at Hathor, the goddess of love, and strands of golden light flickered, reflecting in the mind of Hathor, the goddess of love. The goddess of love Hathor gave up the protection of her body, allowing Qin to modify his body without any obstacles. For a moment, it was as if a string was plucked in the mind of Hathor, the goddess of love, and all negative emotions disappeared. Instead, all that was left was his endless love for Set, the god of desert and war. This endless, gurgling desire erupted like a volcano. There was tenderness and sweetness in the beautiful eyes of Hathor, the goddess of love, but all she could see was the lonely and cold figure of Set. I don't know where the love comes from, but it grows deeper and deeper. The goddess of love Hathor involuntarily ran towards Set, who was fighting. Set had no intention of stopping the goddess of love Hathor, simply because he was very confident in his own field of war. Once the territory is opened, no one can come in, unless it is the sun god among the 9 pillars of God. Only the sun god Ra, who holds the original power of the world, has the power to destroy everything. But this time, Seth was wrong. The goddess of love Hathor transformed into the form of a cow, and her hooves suddenly stepped out in the void and ran into Set's arms. The scarlet field shone with a strange light, but it was like nothing in front of the goddess of love Hathor and had no effect at all. The goddess of love Hathor flashed, her eyes burning, and she rushed towards Set with passion. At the moment of collision, Seth's originally gloomy face revealed an expression of disbelief. How is that possible? Why would a god directly break into my realm? Seth was so shocked by this sudden situation that he forgot what he was doing for a moment. The goddess of love Hathor also showed a strange look when she looked at Set, who was clinging to her body. The cold wind whistled across her face, and the sudden contact and disappearance of the love affair made her heart beat faster and the excitement soar. Unconsciously, the goddess of love Hathor suddenly raised her hoof and gave Set 2 hooves. Ah! Seth had no defense against this at all, and his handsome face reflected 2 red and swollen hoof prints, which looked extremely strange. Okay, you are the first one to step on my face. Seth's voice was full of cruelty and murderous intent, and his eyes were gloomy and cold. He raised his arm, and a sharp sickle appeared in his palm, with a cold and violent aura, as if it could cut everything. This is the artifact that Set used to divide Osiris, which can cut through all things in the world. But this time, Set aimed it at Hathor, the goddess of love, and chopped it down with all his strength. Hathor, the goddess of love, stepped back in fear and turned back into human form again. A cold light flashed by, leaving a scar on the beautiful face of the goddess of love Hathor, and jade-red blood flowed out. Blood flowed down his face and fell from a high altitude. When Qin found it, he dodged and absorbed the blood into his body. Even just 1 drop of a god's blood is worth a fortune. Divine blood contains powerful energy and also contains the gods' understanding of their own domain. Qin had no way to collect the blood of gods when he was in the Greek mythology world, and he didn't need to do so when he was in the Norse mythology world. After arriving in the world of Egyptian mythology, there was neither the ability nor the opportunity to collect it. Now, taking advantage of the battle, he has just enough opportunity. At this moment, Qin only thought that these gods could fight to the death, so that he could reap the benefits. Even if he couldn't die, some of the gods' blood would be a treasure to him. At that time, he can use the blood of the gods to further transform his powerful body. After obtaining the blood of the goddess of love Hathor, Qin extracted some knowledge from the blood and reconstructed it. His body kept changing and twisting, until finally, he stopped. The goddess of love Hathor was also very powerful. Qin obtained the vitality of a cow, an indomitable will and the strength to move mountains and rivers from the blood of the god. After getting all this, Qin turned his head and looked at the battlefield again. He desperately hopes to obtain the blood of other gods, which will make him even more powerful and give him more means. Fight, fight, fight! Qin looked towards the battlefield with a gloomy look. At this time on the battlefield, Set had already been enraged, holding a sickle and madly slashing at the goddess of love Hathor. The goddess of love Hathor was frightened and panicked, her beautiful face was full of fear and anxiety. After seeing this, the scorpion god and the magic goddess Isis rushed forward and took part of the attack. Set was too powerful. Even if the 3 goddesses joined forces, they were no match for him. Suddenly, the sky started to blow, and a strong wind and yellow sand were raging. Even the distant sky is filled with endless sand. Qin's eyes flashed with a hint of teasing, and he watched this scene with pleasure. Set is the god of the desert, and the desert is the source of his power. At this moment, he brought the power of the desert into the sky, and the balance of victory was tipped. Chapter 206. Endless yellow sand piled up to form a huge gravel giant. The sand giant seems boundless and vast, driving infinite power. Its appearance is exactly the same as Set's, with a tall and majestic body, a gloomy and handsome face, and a long crown with a bird's beak on its head. Just looking at him, there is an invisible pressure lingering in the heart, making people tremble. The huge arm was raised, bringing with it strong wind and yellow sand, and suddenly approached the three goddesses. Endless yellow sand enveloped the goddesses, forming a cage that imprisoned them and made it impossible for them to escape. The magic goddess Isis cast several kinds of magic, and the magic was as brilliant as a flood, but it could not break the indestructible cage. Hee, my dear sister, you still couldn't escape from my grasp after all. Nephthys has been captured by me and imprisoned in a cage at the bottom of the palace. She cannot escape. I will put you together, like birds in a cage, to wash away the shame on me. Seth's cold voice was like an iceberg, venting his dissatisfaction. As one of the 9 most noble gods, he was born with noble divine blood flowing in his veins. He lived happily with his brothers and sisters and spent countless years together. But I didn't expect that all this was just a scam, a world full of lies. The eldest brother, who seemed to be upright and selfless, had an affair with his wife for hundreds of years and gave birth to an illegitimate son, Anubis. The goddess of magic, Isis, did not sympathize with him or stand on the same front with him. Instead, she accused him of killing her brother. All of this caused his mood to distort and change. Seth endured it again and again, but unfortunately all he got in return were accusations and insults. But he is the victim. Why is this happening? Seth was unwilling to give in and was filled with rage. He lost most of his sanity and immersed himself in killing and brutality. For this reason, he began his own revenge. He would make these so-called brothers and sisters pay a heavy price. The giant hand gripped tighter and tighter, leaving countless cracks and blood on the delicate skin of the 3 goddesses. Qin Mu watched this scene excitedly. He expressed little interest in these goddesses. If he were to throw himself into her arms, he would still be willing to give it a try. But given the current situation, I don't think there will be such a good thing. Qin Mu did not rush forward to save the life of a hero, but collected the blood and absorbed the energy and knowledge brought by the divine blood. Unfortunately, the previous body of Osiris had already died, and it was impossible to gain knowledge from his blood. Of course, part of the reason was that Qin Mu couldn't break the defense of his skin. This made Qin Mu feel a little regretful, but when he looked at the dripping blood, he became excited again. With this divine blood, he is one step closer to becoming a god. Oh, I've been discovered. Qin Mu's eyes narrowed as he watched the yellow sand transformed into a whip and hit him violently. His body suddenly changed, transforming into a nimble eagle flying and dancing in the vast sky, avoiding the attack of the whip. Seeing that his first strike failed, Seth conjured up dozens of whips and covered him again. That's outrageous. I want to surrender, but I don't know if it's too late now. Qin Mu had no choice but to flap his wings nimbly to avoid the attack. Just when he thought that this clone was about to be destroyed, suddenly, a huge and majestic voice came. The dark giant snake in chaos is about to attack. All gods should put down their work and grudges and come to resist the enemy. The voice of the sun god Ra carried an irresistible command tone. His words also successfully rescued Qin Mu and the 3 goddesses present. In the world of Egyptian mythology, outside the world, there exists a terrifying god, the Chaos Serpent. He has no thoughts, no consciousness, relying on his own instinctive form, he represents chaos, disorder, and silence. It has an instinctive aversion to the world of Egyptian mythology and wants to destroy it. For this reason, in order to protect world peace, the sun god Ra passed the supreme rulership to the fertility god Osiris, and he himself went to the edge of the world. With him in charge, the world can be peaceful and stable. But the sun god Ra also needs rest, and at certain times, his divine power will be weakened. At this time, all the gods need to go to his residence together to help him resist the Chaos Serpent. This is an irresistible responsibility and obligation engraved deep in the souls of all gods. Qin Mu's eyes flickered, revealing a bit of curiosity. He was intrigued by the story of the sun god Ra fighting the Chaos Serpent. However, his strength is still limited now, and his real body is not here, so he cannot participate. Thinking of this, he took advantage of Seth's inattention and rushed back to the ground. Seth watched him fly away with cold eyes, but did not try to stop him. The most important thing now is to go to the sun boat of the sun god Ra and resist the Chaos Serpent from the sky. This is the most important thing. If the world is invaded by the Chaos Serpent, it will cause the destruction and demise of the world. If the world were destroyed and everything ceased to exist, then hatred would not be able to be vented or avenged. This was something Seth could not tolerate. So he watched Qin Mu leave coldly. To him, Qin Mu is just a slightly larger ant. Once he is free, I can easily crush him to death. After Qin Mu saved his life, he quickly flew back to his original body. With the knowledge and energy of the divine blood, Qin Mu felt a surge of invisible waves flowing throughout his body, causing his body to undergo a transformation. Under his control, the power of the divine blood transformed his body to a certain extent. When the transformation was completed, his entire face and appearance had changed dramatically. At this moment, he turned into a humanoid monster with bull horns, spikes on his tail, and a pair of powerful wings extending from his thick back. At first glance, it looks like a combination of several animals. Qin Mu clenched his fists, feeling the changes in the powerful force in his body, and was very satisfied. Now, he can easily kill the giants under his command with one punch. The blood flowing in the body is light golden in color, extremely noble, and contains infinite power and vitality. This is a sign of entering the realm of the gods. Qin Mu's body now is infinitely close to that of a god. He only needs more training and understanding, and maybe in the next moment, his body will become a god's body. Where is my mother? Why hasn't my mother come back? Horus asked in panic, staring at Qin Mu. At this time, Horus was very concerned about the whereabouts of the magic goddess Isis. But he had not grown up yet and was not yet a god, so he could not fly into the sky and watch the war between gods. Seeing Qin Mu's tricks flying back at him, he immediately ran up to inquire. Chapter 207. Qin Mu turned to look at Horus and said calmly, "Your mother and uncle Set were called by the sun god Ra to the sun boat to resist the chaos serpent. If I'm lucky, I should be able to come back." Qin Mu didn't finish his words, and he didn't know the details. As for the chaos serpent and the sun god Ra, he only knew a little about them from history books. In this mythical world, he had never seen or come into contact with them, and had no idea of their personalities and conduct. If the sun god Ra had good intentions towards his descendants, he would certainly mediate and allow the magic goddess Isis and Set to reconcile. After hearing Qin Mu's words, Horus's frown relaxed slightly, but the sadness on his face could not be concealed. Qin Mu looked at his boyish appearance, patted his shoulder and encouraged him, "Now that your mother is gone, as a brother, you must shoulder the responsibility and resist the enemy." At this time, outside the city wall, there was still a huge dark army, like a dark cloud, about to crush the city. The situation in Amr did not ease with the departure of the gods. On the contrary, Eminem is even more dangerous at this time. Horus looked at the soldiers outside the wall with determination in his eyes. That was his enemy, the guy who destroyed the place where he lived. He swore in his heart that he would do his best to protect his brothers and sisters and the people of this land. But at this time, his strength was still weak. He turned his gaze towards Qin Mu. Horus was extremely wise and could see Qin Mu's extraordinary qualities at a glance. As long as we win over Qin Mu and have his help, we will be able to repel the enemy. I would like to take you as my master and pray that you can help me. Horus saluted respectfully with a burning look in his eyes. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows. He also didn't expect Horus to choose him. As the son of God, shouldn't he be extremely proud? But it's quite interesting. Qin Mu nodded and agreed. He wanted to give it a try, as a behind-the-scenes promoter, to teach Horus how to fight Set and see if he could become the third pharaoh. If he really succeeds, he will be the pharaoh's teacher and have a high status. Since you beg me sincerely, I will agree. Qin Mu raised his head and said with a little reserve. But my rule is to kowtow 3 times and bow 9 times, as a master-disciple ritual. Of course he didn't want to refuse Horus' request to be his master, and he was very happy to do so. But the necessary posture still needs to be put on. Things that are given to you for free will only make people look down on you. Horus is just a mortal now, not yet a god, and is not so arrogant and cold. On the contrary, Horus had an inexplicable affection for Qin Mu from the bottom of his heart. Under Qin Mu's command, he kowtowed 3 times and bowed 9 times and became Qin Mu's apprentice. Seeing his sincerity, Qin Mu accepted him as his disciple. Since then, the control behind Eminem has been owned by Qin Mu to a certain extent. Mu was Qin Mu's territory, so he naturally didn't want it to be dragged into the quagmire of war again. Under the command of Qin Mu, Horus offered a high price and recruited some players as his subordinates. No one understands players better than him, and no one understands the usefulness of players better than him. With the help of Qin Mu, the players launched a counterattack, disrupting Set's army and making it unable to launch new attacks. The two sides continued to be in a stalemate, but the situation gradually stabilized. Qin Mu gained a lot of benefits from it. All kinds of power, treasures and knowledge were gathered by him like the tide. Now, his words are more effective than Horus. Qin Mu did not leave Horus, his cheap apprentice, alone, but instead taught him some things. After all, Qin Mu had great expectations for Horus. When Horus grows up and becomes a god, he can go and fight Set. Qin Mu formulated a series of training conditions and tasks. During the day, Horus learned how to fight. As a child, his fighting skills and experience needed to be improved. Send various warrior monsters to fight him every day. As combat skills and experience are enhanced, lethality and combat capabilities become stronger. When night came, Qin Mu found many teachers to teach Horus various knowledge and learning. As a god, of course he must have knowledge and talents far beyond ordinary people, so that he can be qualified as a candidate for the pharaoh. Under the supervision of Qin Mu, Horus underwent rigorous training and practice. Through day after day of training, he gradually grew up, becoming noble and decisive in killing. 1 year later, the heaven and earth changed suddenly, and the whole world was shrouded in darkness, but soon the light returned. Countless rays of light filled the sky, and a few golden lights returned to the emperor like sharp swords. It's finally over. Qin Mu looked at the strange scene and said lightly. The gods returned from the sky, and it seemed that the disaster of world destruction had been resolved. Teacher, will my mother come back? Horus asked with hope in his eyes. Qin Mu touched his nose and replied calmly. I don't know, but it looks like it should be fine. The sky was clear and there was no trace of the terrifying waves of the battle between gods. Horus stood on the high platform, looking into the sky, guarding his mother's return. Qin Mu, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face. He ate when he should eat and drank when he should drink. The most important thing in life is to enjoy yourself. He thought it through. If the magic goddess Isis did not recognize him after her return and wanted to drive him away, it would be worth it. After all, he had been dominating here and enjoying himself for a while. However, none of his ideas came true. Isis, the goddess of magic, has returned, intact. She was very satisfied with everything Qin Mu had done, and her favorability towards him also increased dramatically. So, with the help of the magic goddess Isis, Qin Mu successfully became the real second-in-command of M&M. To Horus, Qin Mu still maintained his duties as a teacher. When the magic goddess Isis returned, she brought a sacred artifact and gave it to Horus. However, when it was given to Horus, Qin Mu was also allowed to study and examine it. This artifact is a pair of angel-like wings. The pure white wings were raised high, and the holy light shone between the wings. As the wings fluttered, a strong wind surrounded them. Under the witness of Qin Mu, Horus installed the divine wings on his back. From then on, even though Horus was not a god, he had the ability to fly. This pair of divine wings is quite good. It's actually a growth-type divine weapon. Qin Mu looked at it, stroked the wings, and exclaimed in admiration. Of course, this was given to me by my mother, the goddess of the sky. The magic goddess Isis looked up at the sky and said. Lightly. Chapter 208. Qin Mu remembered that these four gods all had a common parent, the sky and the earth. Unfortunately, because of the sun god Ra, the sky and the earth were separated, resulting in the separation of the lovers. Qin Mu studied the divine wings and gained considerable benefits. The divine wings contain the authority of the god of the sky, allowing the operator to fly freely in the sky. Even mortals can fly freely, just like birds. After Horus obtained this divine armor, he could travel thousands of miles a day and soar into the sky. Based on this equipment, Qin Mu created some similar equipment and installed them on himself. When he transformed, he also gained the powerful ability to control the wind. The days of peace passed quickly. Set, the god of war and desert, returned to the earth, starting a new round of war. Qin Mu avoided this high-level game between gods if he could. His strength is too weak now, and he cannot intervene in the war between the main gods, but he has collected a lot of gods' blood. With the blood of the gods, his strength increased by leaps and bounds. The secret of becoming a god is contained in the blood of gods, and Qin Mu has been trying to comprehend the mystery. This day, Qin Mu received a call from the magic goddess Isis. Qin Mu frowned, wondering what the magic goddess Isis had to say. He is now at the critical moment of comprehending the mysteries of the gods, and he has already informed outsiders not to disturb him unless necessary. Come to the magnificent palace. Come and take a look, can Horus' eyes be restored? The magic goddess Isis said anxiously with a sad face. Qin Mu frowned and walked out from the crowd. Looking closer, Horus was lying quietly on the bed curtains, his face ashen, his eyes closed and lifeless. What's going on? What happened? Qin Mu opened Horus' eyelids with his hands and looked carefully into his eyes. The eyes that were once as clear as gemstones lost their sparkling light, as if they had lost their souls, leaving only a dark and deep void. Qin Mu's eyes narrowed, and he immediately saw the problem. Horus' eyes were gouged out. Who did it? As soon as he finished speaking, he thought of someone. The only one who could do such a thing without being discovered was Set, the god of war and the desert. As one of the 9 gods, he is hostile to Horus. The magic goddess Isis clenched her fists, her eyes full of worry for her son. It was Set. He sneaked into the city and tried to coerce my Horus. When he was discovered, he dug out his eyes. The goddess of magic, Isis, concealed part of the truth. When Set saw Horus, he tried to violate him, but was unsuccessful. This incident was too damaging to Horus' reputation, so Isis naturally hid herself. Qin Mu looked at the invisible hole and felt a little overwhelmed. Those eyes hold the source of Horus' magical power. It was created by Qin Mu based on the magic cores on the Warcraft and the demon pills on the monsters in the novel. Horus originally had no talent for magic, but with his help, he solidified several spells in his body. The source of energy for these magics is his eyes. He thought no one would notice, but unexpectedly, Seth found out and dug out his eyes. It is extremely difficult to make up for it. Those were not just an ordinary pair of eyes, but also represented a part of his soul, flesh, and blood. I'm afraid it can't be recovered. We can only take it back from Set. Qin Mu shook his head and said to the magic goddess Isis. After hearing this, Horus, who was lying on the bed, clenched his originally calm hands tightly, which shows that he was not calm in his heart. Now that Holuso can't see, it's a big problem. I have a way to temporarily create a replacement for the eyes, but it requires your blood as a mother. Qin Mu turned his gaze toward Isis. He has been craving the blood of the magic goddess Isis for a long time. As the goddess of magic, Isis is not good at close combat, so Qin Mu did not collect her blood. This was the perfect time. Qin Mu unceremoniously tried to ask for her divine blood. He was 90% sure. Isis's care for Horus is unmatched by any other dozen children. Perhaps in most parts of the world, people love and place the most hope on the eldest son. Isis's eyes showed determination. She knew that Qin Mu was collecting divine blood, so she had been cautious all along. But if she could help her son and restore the light in his eyes, she would be willing to sacrifice her own divine blood. Qin Mu didn't know what was in the mind of the magic goddess Isis. Even if they knew, they would just laugh at it. It wasn't like he was cursing her with her divine blood, so there was no need to be so scared. However, divine blood is indeed a very important thing for gods. The magic goddess Isis once used a similar method to harm the omnipotent sun god Ra. Therefore, after discovering Qin Mu's actions, Isis was extremely careful and attentive, and did not give Qin Mu the opportunity to harvest her divine blood. Isis's slender fingers slid, leaving a scar on her arm and a pool of blood. The blood is colorful, with flowing light on the surface, which is mysterious and extraordinary. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, he took out a pottery jar and caught the blood. These are all treasures. Those players may never see a drop of divine blood in their entire lives, but he has it in jars. He did not stop supplying her blood until Isis's beautiful body trembled and floated like a willow. Yes, this is enough. Wait for me for a few days, and I will use this blood to bring new light to Horus. Qin Mu looked at the divine blood in his hand, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. With these divine bloods, his progress in comprehending the mysteries of the gods will surely be greatly increased. After Qin Mu got the divine blood, he immediately began to retreat again. He also took Horus' blindness to heart. After all, he is my apprentice, so I should show him some concern. Qin Mu used the blood of the magic goddess Isis to refine an eye of a strange shape. However, this eye was not placed in his eye socket, but between his eyebrows. This eye is like a radar, and can freely scan everything around it. It also has considerable benefits in combat. Using it in battle, you can freely see through all the behavioral tracks in the enemy's body. In other words, it can be used to achieve the effect of prediction. After Qin Mu was successfully refined, it was given to Horus, who was recovering from his injuries. At this time, Horus was lying on the bed, with the beautiful and graceful goddess of love Hathor beside him. Hathor looked at Horus with eyes full of spring, charmingly and movingly, like a passionate woman. Qin Mu was not surprised, foreign myths were just so outrageous. He put the things down and turned to leave without disturbing the young couple. Chapter 209. After wearing the eyebrows and eyes made by Qin Mu, Horus regained his sight. Although it was different from ordinary eyes and had a blurry and colorful vision, it also cheered Horus up. To celebrate and for couples who truly loved each other, Horus married the goddess of love Hathor. The goddess of love Hathor is the adoptive mother of Horus, but this is not a problem for the gods. As long as they truly love each other, it doesn't matter even if they are relatives, let alone if they are not closely related by blood. The goddess of love Hathor was transformed from an eye of the sun god Ra, and is the eye of Ra. The blood relationship is very distant, and she is even the great-grandmother. Before the creation of the world, the sun god Ra dug out his own eyes in order to find his child, the goddess of love Hathor. After completing her mission, the goddess of love Hathor returned to the sun god Ra. But when she returned, she found that the eyes of the sun god Ra had already grown out and there was no place for her. From then on, she became a separate individual and the goddess of love in Egyptian mythology. Qin Mu didn't pay much attention to all this, after all, he was used to it. As long as there is love, nothing else matters. The world of mythology is quite chaotic, and he is no longer that ignorant boy. He was used to these things. At this time, he obtained the blood of the magic goddess Isis, and tried to extract the knowledge and origin in the blood and replicate it on his own body. Unfortunately, it did not work, and to distract himself, he thought of Horus' wedding. Qin Mu opened the door of the retreat and came outside. The city was bustling with activity at this time, with lights and decorations everywhere, and the atmosphere was full of joy. Various precious foods that were originally scarce were displayed one by one. There are milk, watermelon, candied dates, pomegranates, cantaloupe, and a series of other things that are rarely seen in normal times. Take them out and enjoy them to your heart's content. Qin Mu can feel the joy of the people around him from the bottom of their hearts. He walked along and looked at the smiles on people's faces, as if the shadow of war had gone away. This is the wedding of the gods, the blessing of the gods. At such a sacred and glorious moment, war is not allowed. The current pharaoh Set had to abide by this treaty and wait for the wedding of Horus and the goddess of love Hathor to be over. Qin Mu followed the long street and came to the magnificent palace. As soon as he entered the door, he saw pairs of beautiful women with graceful figures and gorgeous clothes lining up to invite him. "Welcome, Mr. Imperial Master." The beauties bent down and called out softly and beautifully. Qin Mu knew that this must have been a suggestion made by a player, and was adopted by the gods for this wedding. Otherwise, it would be impossible for some customs of modern society to appear at this wedding. Just as he was watching this somewhat incongruous wedding, a strange force swept in with the strong wind. Qin Mu secretly thought that something was wrong and hurried over. Qin Mu was very familiar with and understood that power. That was the breath of the god of war and desert, full of restlessness and tyranny. As Qin Mu, who studies the blood of Set all day long, of course understands how powerful he is. How could Seth dare to come alone on such a happy day? This made people very worried. Following the breath of wind and sand, we came all the way to the depths of the palace. Here, many powerful gods are hiding, waiting for the wedding to begin. They are sacred, great, and inviolable, and do not want ordinary humans to see or approach them. When Set, the pharaoh who now rules the world, appeared, they surrounded him with solemn faces. "Seth, the wedding of gods cannot be destroyed. You are going to commit a crime that is against the will of the world." The magic goddess Isis stopped Set. Isis remained absolutely vigilant and angry towards Set. As the god of war, Set has started countless wars and plunged the world into flames of war. She was not sure whether Horus' marriage would lead to another war. Seth has now fallen into madness and is likely to do something like this. "Haha, my dear nephew is getting married, of course I have to come," Seth said slowly with a hint of sarcasm in his cold voice. As the words were spoken, countless wind and sand rolled up and transformed into a human figure, which was Set. His desert domain allows him to freely control the wind and sand, and with the help of the power of the wind and sand, he can condense an avatar. I really miss that night and the wonderful time I spent with Horus. Set's voice sounded again, as if he and Horus were a close couple. The surrounding gods and some of the servants opened their eyes wide and stared at the scene in a daze. This expression is just like a silly roe deer that has eaten melon. Seth, you still have the nerve to say that? Horus looked a little excited, and was ready to go forward and fight with his weapon. Qin Mu coughed lightly at the side. After hearing this, Horus immediately stopped what he was doing and stood still obediently. Qin Mu stopped Horus from falling into Set's conspiracy. Regardless of whether that so-called one night was real or not, it cannot be acknowledged. Also not allowed is attacking Set, otherwise it would be considered breaking the rules. At that time, Set, as the victim, can launch an attack, and the treaty that gods cannot attack each other when they are married will be broken. That night, we uncle and nephew had a deep communication. Seth smiled calmly, with a teasing look in his eyes. His deep eyes are bottomless, and his smiling face seems like a glacier that has never melted for thousands of years. Seth, as Horus' uncle, are you ashamed of your behavior? Isis asked. And you didn't have any intimate communication with each other. Horus rejected you. Don't tell false lies for no reason and cause misunderstandings. Isis, as a mother, stepped forward to defend Horus. If it is confirmed that Horus was forcibly invaded by Set, it will have a very negative impact on his reputation. Horus is her and Osiris's eldest son, with noble blood and unlimited potential. If you are troubled by such vicious rumors, you will definitely not be able to become a great god. Even if Set was defeated in the future, he would not be able to replace him and become the new pharaoh. This was something Isis could not tolerate. She would not allow her child's reputation to be damaged, nor would she allow Seth to destroy this beautiful and holy wedding. If Horus could be with the goddess of love Hathor and receive the blessings of the gods, he would definitely become a great god. Horus also understood at this time and stepped forward to explain. The gods and humans all understood Set's tricks and despised him. Chapter 210. Above the magnificent palace, Seth was not too angry when he saw that his plan had failed. He found a chair and sat down as if no one was around. Since my nephew is getting married, of course I, as his uncle, have to come and bless him. Seth had a perverse expression, and his scarlet eyes were full of depth. The gods were very dissatisfied with his behavior, but due to his powerful strength, no one stepped forward to complain. Qin Mu picked up a glass of crystal clear wine, held it in his hand and walked forward. Great Pharaoh, let me toast you. When the wine glass was placed in front of Pharaoh Set, he raised his proud head slightly and glanced at it casually. Are you Horus's master? The founder and leader of the Giant Legion. Set said. I know you. I've encountered you several times while investigating wars between gods. You are very courageous, but also very wise. Seth made a fair assessment of Qin Mu. He was arrogant and indifferent to most humans, but he couldn't help but look up to Qin Mu, a being of infinite wisdom. He could sense a faint threat from Qin Mu. This should have been impossible, but it actually happened. Seth trusted his instincts. He had developed this instinct during the first half of his life, fighting thousands of battles to expand the Egyptian empire. Because of this, he suspected that Qin Mu was a god in disguise. He picked up the glass and drank it all. This is to show respect for Qin Mu, and also to vent the resentment in his heart. It is true that he is now despised by the gods, tyrannical and unjust, and humans also fear him, but who can know the pain in his heart? He made countless contributions to the expansion of Egypt's territory. But he was betrayed by his brother and wife. How tragic it was! He stared at the newlyweds in front of him with a leisurely gaze, his deep eyes flickering, and no one knew what he was thinking. Qin Mu watched him finish the wine in the glass, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The fine wine in the glass was carefully prepared by him, but he did not expect to use it at this wedding. What was even more unexpected was that Seth actually drank it all in one gulp without noticing any clues at all. At this time, Qin Mu withdrew his gaze and watched the beginning of the wedding indifferently. Despite Set's interruption, the wedding of Horus and the goddess of love Hathor still went on normally. Their union was blessed by countless gods. The two newlyweds put on new clothes. The man is handsome, with a handsome face, and looks extremely noble. The woman has a stunning appearance and a graceful figure. Her every frown and smile is captivating and lovable. Both of them have absolutely outstanding looks. After dressing up, they look even more extraordinary and as brilliant as stars. The gods all congratulated and mortals also offered their sincere blessings. Delicious food, fine wine, fruits, and vegetables were placed on the table like water. Everyone gathered together, toasting and chatting, making the place very lively. What does the Imperial Master think of marriage? Seth's voice suddenly rang in Qin Mu's ears. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and looked at Seth with interest. He didn't expect that the cold and aloof Seth would take the initiative to chat with him. And the question is about this topic. Logically speaking, Seth would be furious after being cheated on, but looking at his current appearance, he seems to have gradually calmed down. Dear Pharaoh, it's not a good idea to ask a bachelor this question. Qin Mu took a sip of the wine in the glass in his hand. Marriage seems to be a wonderful thing. I sincerely wish the two of you all the best in getting married. Qin Mu licked her red lips, her eyes flickered, and a half-smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Seeing his appearance, Seth glanced at him calmly and turned his gaze back to the two people who were taking the oath. It looks beautiful, but behind this beauty, there is so much filth and dirtiness hidden. Qin Mu remained silent and did not respond. Now that his apprentice is getting married, he doesn't want to say anything discouraging. If we say something that provokes Seth and makes him make a scene, then everyone will lose face. After Qin Mu came to the mythological world, he had long since lost interest in so-called marriage and love. It is nothing but a ridiculous thing that humans imagine and imprison themselves in their short lives. When their lifespans are extended indefinitely, and they even step into the realm of gods. Over the long years, these invisible shackles will inevitably decay and break. If this were not the case, why would the private lives of those gods become so dissolute? In their hearts, most gods do not have much identification with so-called marriage. These are just things created by weak humans. Human life is short, fleeting like a firework. The gods are high above, looking down on the world, and are eternal and immortal. All food, clothing, and daily necessities, as well as various enjoyments, are of the highest quality. For them, the existence of love is just a spice in the eternal years, adding a little fun to life. Only in this way can endless time and eternal years be spent. Qin Mu met many gods and gradually came to agree with their ideas, achieving a certain balance in cognition. More importantly, Qin Mu does not believe that eternal marriage exists. The gods in the Western mythology world have extremely licentious private lives, which makes him feel that all relationships between people are just for show. Because of this, he decided not to fall in love in this life. The wedding finally came to an end as the two took their vows and became husband and wife. Horus held the hand of Hathor, the goddess of love, and was about to leave and enter the bridal chamber. Wait, now that our marriage is over, can we continue our war? Seth's domineering voice sounded. He rudely interrupted the wedding, making it less than perfect. All the gods looked at him in unison, with expressions of contempt, hatred, disgust, and indifference in their eyes. But Seth remained fearless in the face of danger and looked at Horus as if a spring breeze was blowing on his face. Horus's face was cold and he clenched his fists. Seth, now that the gods have not left, you can't wait. As he spoke, Horus waved his right hand, and a golden spear engraved with magic patterns appeared in his hand. This magic spear was made casually by Qin Mu, and the magic goddess Isis added several auxiliary magics to it, making it extremely powerful. Since you want to fight, I will grant your wish. Horus had a firm look in his eyes and a tall posture, and he was not afraid of Set. There seemed to be a golden flame burning in his eyes, and his fighting spirit was high in order to protect his newly married wife. Chapter 211. Horus possesses the powerful blood of two Ennead gods, with unlimited potential and extraordinary talent. His strength is growing every moment as time goes by. Under Qin Mu's rote learning, his ability improved by leaps and bounds. His combat effectiveness had already reached the peak level below that of the gods. Now the venue is in Am, and it is witnessed by the gods. It is Horus' home venue, so Horus is not afraid of Set. There is a magic circle in Amr that weakens the power of gods. Set is preparing to cause trouble, but the magic goddess Isis will not agree. Directly opening the magic circle prevents Set from fully exerting his strength. As one grows stronger, the other shrinks, and Set's strength is no more than that of a low-level god. Horus is dressed in divine armor, so it's not that he has no chance of defeating Set. Haha, my nephew, I'm very happy that you have so much confidence. Seth said slowly, his eyes as deep as ink. But I will break your spine, break your arms, and trample your self-confidence under my feet. The cold words, the condescending attitude, and the look that looked down on everything made it seem as if everything was insignificant in front of Set. As he raised his hand, a dark red divine light appeared on his palm and hit Horus with lightning speed. The sound was so loud that it seemed like the sky was collapsing and the earth was breaking. In an instant, Horus flew backwards like a cannonball and hit the wall behind him. The wall shattered into pieces, turning into countless huge rocks, and smoke and dust rose up. Horus was buried under the rubble. The gods were shocked, and the magic goddess Isis looked worried and couldn't help but step forward to stop them. The goddess of love Hathor was also full of sorrow, her eyes filled with hatred for Set and worry about Horus. Fortunately, at this time, Horus pushed away the stones on his body and stood up again. The golden divine wings spread out, brilliant and dazzling, and a powerful wave of divine power emerged from behind it. The divine wings flapped, creating gusts of wind. With the help of the power of the wind, Horus appeared in front of Set like lightning in an instant. Every punch he throws hits the target. Fierce fists hit Seth's body like raindrops, violently and cruelly, making bang 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 sounds. Seth was not afraid of danger, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Horus's fighting skills were superb, but they did not exceed his expectations. As the god of war, he has superb combat abilities and rich experience, and can handle this situation with ease. He turned his body slightly and adjusted the direction of his torso, thus relieving the force of Horus' fist. "My lovely nephew, you are still a long way from defeating me." Seth had an indifferent look on his face and spoke calmly. "I've seen and touched your body, it's really nice." His verbal attack at this time was intended to provoke Horus. The most important thing during the battle is a balanced mentality. Horus was young after all, and after hearing what he said, his eyes were filled with anger, as if a storm was brewing. "Keep calm," Qin Mu reminded. Under the stimulation of the words, Horus's breathing had become somewhat manic and unstable. If he could not calm down, his flaws would soon be revealed. As the god of war, Set has rich combat experience and can definitely see the flaws and exploit them. At that time, Horus would have no choice but to be defeated. With Qin Mu's reminder, Horus' eyes gradually became clear. He took a deep breath and changed from his original all-out, extremely violent fighting style to a steady one. It seems simple and weak, but this kind of attack has a certain effect. Every punch, every kick, every move, and every style invisibly restrained Seth's hands and feet, making it impossible for him to exert his full strength. "Yes, the teacher you found is quite capable. Unfortunately, ordinary skills cannot bridge the huge gap between you and the gods." Set stared at Horus with a cold look. "Today I will let you see the great power of me, the god of war and desert." But after Seth finished speaking, his body paused and his eyes looked a little surprised. "How is it possible? Why can't my body turn into sand?" "Isis, have you developed a magic to counter my ability to turn into sand?" Seth looked at Isis, the goddess of magic, with cold eyes. The magic goddess Isis was stunned and looked straight into Seth's cold eyes, wondering what he was talking about. "My dear sister, judging by your reaction, it's probably not you." Set turned his gaze to the other gods, looking at them one by one. In a moment, he saw Qin Mu's half-smile and frowned. "It was you, did you do something? There's something wrong with the drink you gave me just now." Seth's mind was in a state of confusion, and he immediately thought of the reason. The gods looked at Qin Mu with disdain, surprise, and vigilance in their eyes. Qin Mu ignored these glances and just stared at Seth's body with burning eyes. "Yes, I put something in the drink." Qin Mu had obtained Set's divine blood, and for this reason, his research on Set was the most in-depth. The power of Set Desert is also very strong, and it can turn its body into yellow sand. Once this pattern appears, it is difficult to beat. Qin Mu thought of countless ways, and the most effective one was to flood the yellow sand with the water of the Nile River. Only in this way can Set's ability to turn deserts into sand be broken. The other method, which is more difficult, is poisoning. Using his research and experiments with Set's blood, Qin Mu created a drug that could limit his ability to turn into sand. However, this kind of medicine is difficult to feed into the mouth of Set, who is heavily guarded and has strict control. But now that Horus is getting married, Set actually showed up on his own initiative to attend the wedding. When Qin Mu saw that scene, he came up with the idea of testing the medicine on him. After putting the medicine in the wine, he handed it to Seth. Unexpectedly, Set would take it and drink it all in one gulp, which saved Qin Mu a lot of words. "Respected Pharaoh, it seems you can't leave today." Qin Mu looked at Set's cold eyes and said. "Humph, you villain, you actually poisoned my drink." Seth snorted coldly. But it only limits my ability to transform into sand. You don't have the ability to catch me yet. Qin Mu shook his head and said seriously. When two armies are at war, of course they have to fight with all their might. Poisoning is just one of the means. If you hadn't made trouble, you could have left Emu safely. It's just that you are too arrogant. Seth's eyes were indifferent, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Then let me see what you can do. After saying this, Seth gave up the fight with Horus and turned to pounce on Qin Mu. Chapter 212. The lively wedding turned into a battlefield. Qin Mu looked at Seth, who was rushing towards him, his eyes full of eagerness. He has improved his strength so much, but has never really fought. It is a good opportunity for him to use Seth to test his current abilities. In the blink of an eye, the body suddenly underwent tremendous changes. The flesh and blood began to reorganize, the genes underwent earth-shaking changes, and the appearance and race underwent tremendous changes. It only takes a moment to transform from a human into a monster. In the eyes of the gods, Qin Mu turned into a terrifying being with an ox head, ox horns, snake scales, tiger claws, and a scorpion tail. Just by standing there, his tall and upright figure almost broke the ceiling. It is majestic, like a terrifying demon, emitting an aura of tyranny, coldness, and murder. Seth was also a little stunned when he saw this scene. But he adjusted his mentality in an instant and continued to attack Qin Mu. His stature is far inferior to Qin Mu's, but his aura is as majestic as Qin Mu's. In just a moment, the two fists collided. There was silence all around, and invisible waves emerged from the fist. The surrounding decorations and buildings were shattered in the surging waves. Qin Mu's tall and straight body took 3 steps back and a low and hoarse roar came from his throat. Seth took 2 steps back before slowly stopping. Qin Mu opened his eyes wide like a wild beast, took a deep breath, and rushed towards Seth again like a spring. The punch was fierce and the powerful attack came like raindrops. Fierce, violent, and extremely powerful. The attacks, one after another, were like heavy hammers, pinning Sato to the spot. In the previous attack, Qin Mu was not fully adapted to this burly body, so he was at a disadvantage. But after the adjustments, Qin Mu controlled this demon-like body, like a standing Tai Sui, running rampant throughout the world without any scruples. Even as powerful as Set, one of the Ennead, could not match Qin Mu's carefully modified body in terms of physical strength. Facing the fierce attack, Seth's face was a little solemn and his eyes were slightly downcast. He looked at Qin Mu and fell into deep thought. He was not afraid of Qin Mu, but he found it incredible that a mortal could give him such a difficult time. Not to mention, this person is cruel and ruthless, and has no martial ethics. He dared to drug his apprentice at his wedding. He is truly lawless and his behavior is strange and changeable. However, as the god of war, he had rich combat experience and quickly came up with a response strategy. He exerted force on his legs and jumped to the side nimbly, avoiding the tidal wave of attacks. The aura suddenly changed and the ghost disappeared. Like an assassin in the dark, he kept hovering around Qin Mu, trying to find his weakness and give him a fatal blow. Qin Mu chuckled, and a gleam of reason emanated from the depths of his violent eyes. He still maintained his fierce and domineering attack style, punching Set with extremely explosive force. But during the battle, the internal structure of the body is undergoing silent changes. The sturdy limbs gradually shrank, becoming lean and strong, the thick 5 fingers became as sharp as blades, making hissing sounds in the air. The behavior of the breath changes as the enemy changes. Seth also noticed this and was shocked. He didn't expect that a mere mortal, not even a god, could be so troublesome. His desertification ability is limited and can only be used in the war field. However, if the war field is used in this city, its effectiveness will be greatly reduced. And the person in front of me might have a way to break the impasse. It's really tricky. Thinking of this, Seth jumped away and stopped the fight. The national teacher has some skills. He is worthy of being Horus' teacher. Seth looked at Qin Mu with deep eyes. After seeing it today, it is indeed extraordinary. Seth, are you scared? Horus, who was watching from the side, was so excited that he shouted when he saw Seth stop. I am restricted in this city and cannot exert my full strength. Of course I won't fight. Seth said indifferently. What, my nephew, do you want to stop me? He looked proud and didn't look like someone in trouble at all. As Seth spoke, he stretched out his hand, and 2 balls sparkling with gold and silver appeared on his palm, as dazzling as bright gems. As soon as this item came out, the eyes of all the gods were focused on his hands. It was none other than the lost eyes of Horus. Seth sneaked into the city in the dark and windy night, intending to commit evil. Horus was handsome, extraordinary, and had a high prestige in the city. The magic goddess Isis seemed to want to help him gain the position of pharaoh. And Horus had enormous potential, and even when the gods were first born, few could match him. Set wanted to destroy Horus, so he killed him. Taking advantage of the cover of night, while Horus was sleeping, defiled him. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and they had to dig out his eyes. Defilement of Horus would accomplish that goal. The pharaoh would not allow it to be taken by a defiled man, and neither would the gods. But the plan failed. Fortunately, during the fight, Set dug out Horus' eyes. Horus, who possesses divine blood, can have his eyes gouged out but can still have their eyes reinstalled as long as the eyeballs are not damaged. When Horus saw his own eyes, he also stopped. If he took another step, Seth's cold hands would crush his eyes. Qin Mu also saw this scene and realized that Set was threatening them with the eye of Horus. Qin Mu had no choice but to stop. Although he didn't care much about whether Horus would become blind, he was now on Horus' side and Horus' master, so he still had to put in some superficial effort. Hand over the eye of Horus and I will let you go. Qin Mu changed back to his original appearance and spoke lightly. There was an unquestionable tone in his words. Haha, I don't dare to believe what you say. What if I hand it over and you change your mind? Seth said with a cold smile. He witnessed Qin Mu's insidiousness and cunning today. He had to doubt the truthfulness and accuracy of what Qin Mu said. I can swear in the name of the sun god Ra. Qin Mu said directly to make Set sure. The sun god Ra represents the origin of the world and is the source of gods in Egyptian mythology. No one can break a promise sworn in his name. After hearing this, Seth looked at Qin Mu's face and believed it a little. Most people would not dare to swear in the name of the sun god Ra, let alone disobey his will. Those who violate the rules will be cruelly punished. Some souls will be thrown directly into the sun to burn, while others will be sent to the underworld to fall into eternal darkness. There are all kinds of punishments, everything you can think of. There is nothing that the sun god Ra can't do. Chapter 213. With the endorsement of the sun god Rati, Seth finally felt relieved. He threw one of the eyes of Horus to Horus, took the other in his hand, and turned to walk out of the city. It was not until the end that Seth returned the other eye to Horus. Seth looked at the crowd behind him, and finally fixed his eyes on Qin Mu. I was careless this time. I will never get into this situation again next time. After saying this, he turned and left, leaving behind a tall figure. Qin Mu didn't care about his words. As long as he stayed safely in the city, Seth would have no way to get in. This is indeed the case. When Seth returned, he was freed from the restraints on his body not long after. His ability to turn into sand was restored again. After everything returned to its original state, the army led by Seth launched another attack. They were wearing grim armor, with long swords hanging from their waists, and their movements were coordinated and extremely awe-inspiring. One could tell at a glance that they were elite soldiers who had experienced the battlefield. At this time, everyone realized that Seth was using the city of M to train his troops. He is worthy of being the god of war. When he exerts all his strength, neither his soldiers nor his own strength can be underestimated. If Seth had not been so unpopular and the gods had not helped him, M would have been destroyed by him long ago. Horus led his brothers and sisters, and with the powerful physique and strength of the children of gods, they repelled wave after wave of enemies. Isis, the goddess of magic, and other goddesses resisted Set. Both sides won and lost, and neither side had an overwhelming advantage. Qin Mu took the opportunity to study the secret of how to become a god. He also asked other gods how to become a real god. But the gods couldn't explain it. This is because most of them are high and mighty, extremely noble, and are gods from birth. This world is so unfair. Some people are born in Rome, while others are born in the slums. Those who are born in the lower class will never be able to reach the upper class in their lifetime, no matter how hard they try. And gods are even more unattainable among billions of living beings. Unable to get what he wanted, Qin Mu had to figure it out on his own. Of course, in addition to his own practice, he also set his sights on Horus and several of his brothers and sisters. These are all descendants of gods. They are not gods when they are born, but they have the potential to grow into gods. If he could watch them grow into gods, Qin Mu believed that he could imitate them. Time flies. The sun and the moon rotate, and the seasons come and go. A few years later, Qin Mu devised a way to become a god. However, to be on the safe side, he deliberately handed this method over to other gods to watch. The palace was magnificent and brightly lit. As expected of the national teacher, he is so wise that he can come up with such a wonderful idea. The magic goddess Isis exclaimed in amazement. This was the first time she had praised him like this. After hearing this, the other gods also came forward to take a look. It is a magical idea to create a mysterious method, use the power of faith as a bond, ignite the divine fire, forge the godhood, and control a certain area. If this works, there will probably be many gods in this world. It's a pity that we have already become gods, otherwise we could give it a try and choose the field we like. The gods sighed one after another, looking at the mysterious god in front of them with envy. Unfortunately, their foundations have already been determined and cannot be changed. This method of becoming a god through faith is like chicken ribs to them. Master, can you let me try it? Horus, who was standing side by side with Hathor, the goddess of love, spoke. He has experienced countless wars over the years, and his slightly immature face is now filled with maturity and tenacity. Countless injuries and the deaths of his friends told him that only by becoming a god could he control his own destiny. He was most excited when he saw Qin Mu take out the method of becoming a god through faith. Strength. It's all about strength. If he became a god and had the power to destroy the world, he would no longer have to fear Set's threats. Residents no longer have to worry and live in fear every day. Qin Mu glanced at him, seeming to be a little embarrassed. Horus, my belief in the method of becoming a god has not been verified yet, so I don't know if it will succeed. This time I just want to ask a few gods to see if there are any loopholes or deficiencies. Qin Mu looked at the magic goddess Isis, his eyes full of exploration. His main purpose was to let the magic goddess Isis take a look. In his eyes, only Isis, who was proficient in all kinds of magic, could help him see something. Isis also looked over. She knew Qin Mu's talents very well. However, this person was deep inside, and she looked at Qin Mu as if she was looking at flowers in the fog, unable to figure it out. This time he brought out the method of becoming a god through faith and asked the gods to help him with reference and research. Was it really just for the purpose of perfection? Isis always felt that it was not that simple, but looking at the content of the method of believing in becoming a god, it seemed that there was nothing wrong. However, looking at her son Horus's anxious eyes, she slowly said, there is nothing wrong with believing in the method of becoming a god. There is a great possibility of breaking through and becoming a god. But one of the more troublesome things is that the humans who provide faith cannot be reused. If you want to become a god through faith, you must first gather believers, convince them, and provide the power of faith. This is extremely important and difficult. When Qin Mu heard this, he immediately understood what Isis meant. Now they are trapped in this area, like wild beasts in a cage, unable to get out. Years of continuous war have made people panic. It is estimated that it will be difficult to gather faith, and perhaps there will not even be enough people. What's more, one person cannot use multiple things. One believer cannot offer faith to multiple gods. In this way, believing in the method of becoming a god can only cultivate one god at most. But Qin Mu is the creator, and everything he does is to become a god. Horus also hoped to complete this transformation and become a majestic and sacred god. This is more troublesome. Qin Mu thought of this and smiled. There are still too few humans in Amu, and there are not many believers available. It is estimated that there is only enough for one person. In that case, let Horus become a god first. After Horus becomes a god and defeats Set, the world will be vast and the people will be numerous. I will go to other places to preach and become a god. Master, why don't you come first? This is the method you invented. Horus looked touched. Qin Mu shook his head. You are the offspring of a god, you have great potential. Once you become a god, you will definitely be incredibly powerful. Only you can lead us to victory, defeat Set, and overthrow his brutal rule. You should take this opportunity first. I can wait a little longer. Chapter 214. Qin Mu is very concerned about entering the realm of gods. However, he hopes that others will first take the path to becoming a god that he has envisioned. If there are any shortcomings, he can improve them or try another approach. It is not so easy to enter the realm of gods. There may be many hardships and traps. He planned to let others try it first, and then he would go ahead if there was no problem. Whether it will cause huge impact and harm to the world is none of his business. He is only responsible for himself. His philosophy in life is to be the only one who matters. He alone is the most honorable, and everything else must stand aside. If his method of becoming a god through faith works, he can try to gather the power of faith, ignite the divine fire, and rise high to become a god. And there are so many mythological worlds, Qin Mu has already thought of them. If it were possible to become a god through faith, he would work hard to preach to all realms and ignite all the mythological worlds. By then, all mythological worlds will have their own believers. At that time, Qin Mu believed that he might become as great as the Lord of Grey Mist. After some excuses, Qin Mu gave the spot to Horus. After Horus obtained the method of becoming a god through faith, he lived up to expectations and worked hard to spread his faith. He already had considerable prestige in Eminem, and many people abandoned their faith in the Ennead and threw themselves into his arms. Other gods are not gods through faith, and they do not particularly care about the existence of believers. As a result, many believers of other gods also turned to the arms of Horus at the request of their boss. With everyone working together, countless forces of faith gathered together and formed a thick circle behind Horus. This ring of faith, created by the power of faith, shines brightly like a light bulb. Sacred, dazzling, and brilliant. In people's eyes, he is a defender, a warrior, and a hero who protects Eminem. With praise and devout belief, Horus became a series of domain gods such as Guardian and Warrior. Of course, this title of god is false. He has not yet ignited the divine fire and become a true god. However, at this moment, under the cleansing of the power of faith, his soul gradually became sacred and inviolable. Ordinary people standing in front of him would only feel ashamed and want to kneel down on the ground. As the power of faith flowed in, the wheel of faith with its brilliant light gradually turned, and wonderful changes gradually took place in the deepest part. The brilliant power of faith was compressed like white mist, and finally condensed like a viscous liquid. As the wheel of faith turned, the compression force became stronger and stronger, and a faint sound of prayer filled the light wheel. These voices are loud and solemn. Under the reflection of the sunset glow, they are majestic and sacred, cleansing people's hearts. Horus absorbed the power of faith every day, felt the strength brought by the believers, and constantly recorded his daily changes. These are Qin Mu's requirements to prevent any accidents. Of course, the most important reason is to collect experimental data. If it fails, you can try again next time. As time went on, the path of Horus's preaching became wider and wider. With the help of many players, a large number of dogmas and religious books from the real world were copied. There are also various brainwashing and gift-giving methods, which work together to make their hearts more pious. When the wheel of faith was complete, Horus could no longer absorb any more power of faith, so he began the next step. That is to ignite the divine fire and become a true god. Qin Mu is also looking forward to this day. He was eager to know the difference between becoming a god through faith and being a god through innateness. As night fell and the stars twinkled, the young and handsome Horus stood before the sacred altar. He held a staff made of fine gold and magic, and waved his arms vigorously in a mysterious and unpredictable pattern. As it turned faster and faster, the wheel of faith behind him also spun rapidly, like a dazzling wheel that never stopped. On the staff, the power of faith that could not be absorbed was drawn, forming a golden ball of light, dazzling and mysterious. Sweat oozed slightly from Horus' forehead, but his eyes were determined and his heart was filled with piety and desire to become a god. He had to control the cane while also manipulating the wheel of faith behind him, which was extremely exhausting. But soon, the wheel of faith underwent new changes. The thick power of faith, in the process of continuous compression, seemed to create mysterious sparks. When the spark is born, everything becomes different. A single spark can start a prairie fire. The power of faith, like a fish returning to the sea, poured into the spark and fueled the flames. The fire grew bigger and more intense, as if it was going to burn out all the power of faith. However, as the power of faith was consumed, the spark was also growing rapidly, from being invisible to the naked eye to being visible to the naked eye. Horus raised his hand and drew the remaining power of faith into the flames. With more power of faith, the color of the flame gradually changed and turned into gold. This means the divine fire has been successfully ignited. Horus breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Mu, who was watching from the side, also breathed a sigh of relief. The most difficult step, and the one most likely to fail, actually succeeded. Qin Mu originally just borrowed the method of making fire by friction, but he didn't expect it to be successful. It's really interesting that the power of faith also becomes divine fire as it is compressed and rubbed. When the power of faith was exhausted, a strong heat wave suddenly hit, as if the entire space was shaking. Horus felt the power of fire penetrate his body through his skin, transforming his entire body. An extremely powerful energy also ignited in his heart. The sacred flames surrounded him like a gorgeous light, enveloping him and helping him transform into a divine body. When everything was successful, the divine fire became sluggish and flickered slightly, and the golden light jumped into his brows and entered into his soul. His eyes suddenly became unusually bright, as if the stars in the sky were twinkling in his eyes. Under the heat and help of the divine fire, Horus' soul gradually transformed. The aura of the gods permeated his body, and a powerful pressure enveloped the entire scene. "Come on, my child." Isis stared at Horus. The same was true of Hathor, the goddess of love, who looked at Horus ascending to the throne with her big belly. They themselves didn't feel anything special about becoming gods. However, he couldn't help but feel a little worried about Horus's path to becoming a god. But looking at everything now, it seems to be fine, and there are no accidents, which makes them feel relieved. Chapter 215. At dawn, a ray of light rises from the east, illuminating the world. What followed was a huge change in Horus' body. The sky was filled with rays of light, sacred and solemn. Countless bright star-like lights surrounded him, setting off his handsome face, making him look like a god or a saint. Strange phenomena occurred frequently and the sky and earth changed color. Countless energies from heaven and earth emerged and swarmed in like birds returning to their nests. When everything was over and the dust settled, Horus slowly fell from mid-air. His posture is majestic, sacred, and solemn, giving people a sense of supreme oppression. That is a crushing blow from a higher level of life. It worked. The happiest person, of course, is Qin Mu. He created the method of becoming a god through faith, and Horus' success also represented his own success. Qin Mu walked forward and looked at it carefully. After becoming a god, Horus gave people a sense of sacred majesty. Correspondingly, the human emotions in his golden eyes seemed to have faded a lot. Qin Mu wasn't sure if this was a side effect or if it would heal after a while. At this time, the goddess of magic Isis and the goddess of love Hathor also came over, with excited faces and joyful eyes. He was very happy to see Horus become a god in this way and gain great strength. After all, not every descendant of a god can become a god. Some descendants have the blood of gods, but cannot become gods. Even if their strength is comparable to that of gods, they can only helplessly perish under the erosion of time and enter the underworld. Now that Horus has stepped into the realm of the gods, he can live a carefree life, eternally. In the following period of time, Qin Mu observed carefully every day and collected Horus' blood for research. His transformation was enormous, as if he had been reborn. His golden blood emitted a strange light, which contained the power of protection. This power is powerful and has infinite potential. It complements and counteracts Seth's war field and is extremely extraordinary. Seth also discovered this, and in subsequent battles, he encountered repeated setbacks and could no longer achieve impressive results as before. With the addition of Horus, the balance of victory gradually tilted towards Horus. Seth sent spies to find out the reason and tried to win over Qin Mu. Of course Qin Mu was unwilling. "I have a high status in my current camp, and only someone with a problem in his brain would change sides." He firmly rejected Seth's request and just waited for victory to come. In battle after battle, Horus is gradually gaining control of the divine power he has acquired, and is now becoming increasingly powerful and skilled. Finally, in a battle, Seth was defeated and captured. In order to punish him and deprive him of his position as pharaoh, Horus took away his seed of life. A pharaoh without the seed of life will not be recognized by the orthodoxy. With the support of other gods, Horus successfully became the third pharaoh. As the pharaoh's teacher, Qin Mu's status naturally rose. After Horus became the pharaoh, an area was allocated to him, which became his exclusive territory. Qin Mu went alone to the territory divided by Horus, ruled there, and prepared to try to implement his plan to successfully ascend to godhood. From Horus, Qin Mu did not find any obvious disadvantages in believing in deification. If there is any, it is just that the dependence on faith is stronger. A god without believers can easily fall into a deep sleep due to the lack of power of faith. But this situation is not a big disadvantage for Qin Mu. He has his own territory, and he is not confined to this world. He has countless mythological worlds to travel through, and can even preach in the real world to gather believers. So, Qin Mu began to preach in the territory, trying to cultivate a group of believers of his own. He had plenty of time, and through brainwashing and training generation after generation, he successfully cultivated a group of believers. He defines his own domain and divine powers as rare and powerful abilities such as time and space, wisdom, creation, and change. He didn't know whether he could succeed, but the believers he trained and brainwashed believed that he had these abilities. When everything was ready, Qin Mu held high the divine fire, condensed his divine nature, and became a noble and majestic god. Everything went smoothly and there were no unexpected events. Qin Mu always thinks twice before doing anything and excludes all accidents. After he became a god, he seemed to remember something, and some short-term memories appeared in his brain. Those memories are hazy and vague, as if they were far away, yet as if they were things that had actually happened. Qin Mu didn't understand why, and after investigating many times, he still couldn't find the specific reason. However, he soon discovered that there were many more gods in this world, all of whom were born with the help of his method of becoming a god through faith. Most of these gods of faith are also known as Qin Mu, who is the descendant of the magic goddess Isis. She has many children, all of whom are extremely talented and have great potential. After Horus came to power and became the pharaoh, he granted them territories. After they gained the territory, they also followed the example of Qin Mu and Horus, began to cultivate believers and tried to become gods. With the method and believers, they succeeded as expected. However, there were too many people who believed in gods, resulting in a shortage of humans. After a period of sweetness, conflicts gradually arose between the believers and the gods. They tried to join forces to seize Horus' throne in order to gain more believers. After seeing this scene, Qin Mu probably understood the subsequent development of the Egyptian mythology world. That should be a war of deception and scheming among believers in gods. Qin Mu dodged and disappeared on the spot. He returned to the real world. With so many worlds to choose from, how could he choose to be trapped in an Egyptian mythological world and fight with those gods? There is only one consequence of doing so, and that is picking up sesame seeds and losing watermelons. Not long after the War of Faith gods began, a god discovered Qin Mu's disappearance. Together they devoured his territory and divided up his followers. However, Qin Mu had already returned to the real world and did not care about or understand any of this. In college school, Qin Mu returned to his main body, a majestic, sacred, overbearing and terrifying power permeated his body, and then disappeared in a flash. The students and teachers on campus couldn't help but shudder all over, but when they felt again, they didn't find anything wrong and thought it was just an illusion. However, in the city's reconnaissance institute, a sophisticated instrument emitted a shrill roar. "It's bad, Chief." A powerful force just flashed through the city and was detected by the equipment. A guard reported to the chief nervously. This phenomenon caused many departments to be shocked and they all started to investigate the situation. Chapter 216. Qin Mu had no idea what impact his unintentional action would have. At this moment, he felt the slightly thin energy from the outside world, as well as the power of faith, and couldn't help but be surprised. He was prepared for the power of faith to fail to connect with him. But reality told him that the mythological world had undergone different changes with him because of his faith. He could even feel the ever-changing grey fog that was everywhere. Is this the form of the Lord of Grey Mist? It has penetrated countless mythological worlds. It is truly magnificent. Qin Mu murmured. Looking at the grey fog, he always felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity and wanted to rush in and become one with it. Unfortunately, his reason made him stop and he did not act so impulsively. He didn't understand why he had this feeling, as if they were one. He didn't know whether other people had the same wonderful feeling as him, but he didn't dare to take the risk. In real life, after a brief adaptation, Qin Mu once again chose a new mythological world. Under his manipulation, the world of Egyptian mythology has long deviated from its original settings and plot. Qin Mu flipped through the news and first passed by the world of Indian mythology. In a short period of time, the player who received the blessing died. Originally, he was very powerful and could defeat Indra, the Emperor of Heaven. Unexpectedly, when he returned to the real world, his blessing disappeared and he was beaten to death. This useless blessing ability in the bizarre mythological world made Qin Mu hesitate. That myth is so outrageous that anything strange could happen. Qin Mu felt that with his small body that had just entered the realm of gods, it would be difficult for him to make a difference in the world of Indian mythology. There are all kinds of strange things happening in the world of Indian mythology, with heaven and earth going through cycles of destruction and rebirth. Every time Brahma bestows a blessing, it will cause an unprecedented disaster. This leads to many players both desiring and fearing his blessing. Qin Mu turned and plunged into other mythological worlds. As long as it is a mythological world with a large number of humans or intelligent creatures, Qin Mu will go there to recruit believers. The belief in becoming a god was only spread in the world of Egyptian mythology. It is not circulated in other mythological worlds. Because of this, Qin Mu did not encounter much resistance in spreading his faith in most of the mythological world. Except for a few worlds where faith is needed and religion is prevalent, other mythological worlds are occupied by his believers. When everything settled down, Qin Mu's divine power had already become extremely powerful under the tempering of the endless power of faith. As his strength increased, the hazy consciousness and thinking in his mind gradually recovered. He remembered everything. He is the Lord of Grey Mist, the original god of plants in Greek mythology. When all the fog dissipated, Qin Mu returned to the real world. He cut up his soul to ensure that each mythical world had a part of him. And he is the most important part, and the part that remains in the real world. He woke up at this moment and was about to complete everything he had planned long ago. He had long discovered that the whole world was like a huge cage that one could only enter but not exit. Qin Mu was unwilling to do so, even though he was the most powerful being in this cage. He wanted freedom. When his mind moved and he started to plan his backup plan, an endless grey fog as vast as the Milky Way rushed towards him. What followed was the endless flow of powerful divine power in the grey fog. At the same time, 138 mythological worlds bloomed with dazzling light in the layers of dimensional space, brilliant and gorgeous, and a terrifying atmosphere filled the void. Qin Mu clenched his hand and grasped it lightly, as if invisible threads were extending towards the end of the void. Bang, bang, bang. Countless crisp sounds were heard, followed by the destruction of billions of lives. In all the mythological worlds, all the indigenous creatures and lives created by the players died at this moment, not even the gods could avoid it. He had designed all of this long before he opened the reproduction system to players, allowing them to reproduce with the world's indigenous peoples. The players' bodies were shaped by his divine power. It seemed that the players and the indigenous people had children, but the bodies were provided by Qin Mu. In other words, all their children are born with the blood of Qin Mu. Qin Mu is the ancestor of their blood and the source of all blood. Qin Mu cursed them in the name of their bloodline source, making it impossible for them to resist and killed them all in an instant. The player's fertility is too strong, and with the interference of the fate of Qin Mu's clone, most of the creatures in the many mythological worlds are stained with his blood. Therefore, when he killed people ruthlessly, he almost wiped out most of the creatures in the mythological world. The blood dyed the world red. The scarlet blood mist was rumbling, covering the sky and dyeing the land and ocean red. Some of the souls of Qin Mu in the mythological world also underwent new changes at this time. A strange and brilliant light emanated from their bodies. In the name of the ancestor of blood and the affinity of the same blood, they devoured the blood power floating in the world. Although most of them were mortals, their numbers were too large and their souls underwent amazing transformation after absorbing endless blood power. They used themselves as spears and Qin Mu's main soul as the end point, and began to move closer madly. This is Qin Mu's plan. First sow the seeds, and after they grow, devour the grown fruits to improve your own strength. This is how the poisonous dragon Nidhogg in Norse mythology was born. Qin Mu followed his growth path and set up a unique enhancement method for himself. After swallowing, it pulled many mythological worlds together, directly fused the split souls, and then swallowed these mythological worlds. However, he did not expect that even if his soul was sealed, part of his soul could still become a god on its own. One can even preach in the mythological world, win by numbers, become a master at the level of God King, and break the original seal of the soul. When mythical worlds descended from distant dimensions in the void, the real world was also affected. The players were bounced back to the real world the moment Qin Mu took action, so they didn't know what was happening. But when the mythological world approached the real world, a corresponding ball of light appeared in the sky, shining like a star. The crowds were horrified and in a panic. The government tried its best to maintain order, but to no avail and could not prevent the chaos from happening. Qin Mu didn't care about these things, and was concentrating on controlling everything. The gods in the mythological world, after discovering a disaster that could be described as world-destroying and the world moving toward an unknown destination, began to try to stop it. The actions of those powerful creator gods made Qin Mu a little tired, but fortunately, his savings were enough and he could still continue to pull the world into action. Chapter 217. The sky collapsed, the earth split, the sea dried up and the rocks crumbled, and many mythological worlds fell into destruction. The ocean of the world's original laws is in turmoil, one law after another collapses and is destroyed, bringing the world to the brink of destruction. The gods resisted and struggled, trying all kinds of methods, but unfortunately it was all in vain. The gods of creation awakened from their slumber one after another, and even the souls of the world without ideology or thinking began to resist instinctively. Qin Mu sat upright in the void, countless chains were transmitted from the void, emitting terrifying and dazzling energy. These energies were integrated into his body at an endless and all-encompassing speed, making him stronger and stronger. The terrifying aura continued to grow, and Qin Mu's body expanded infinitely at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into a ball of grey mist that swallowed everything. The grey fog enveloped the infinite world, boundless and eternal, submerging everything. The real world has also been hit unprecedentedly. Why can't I enter those mythical worlds? What happened? How come there are so many stars in the sky that they can be clearly seen even during the day? My wives, how can I live without you? I have made a name for myself in the mythical world, how could such a change happen? Is the world going to end? I saw that the water in many rivers has turned red and many fish and shrimps have died. Countless people are confused and frightened, just like ants, helpless against the disaster that is coming. In order to cope with the possible disaster, various countries put aside their past grudges, united together and implemented many human race protection plans. But before it was implemented for long, the world changed dramatically. All kinds of disasters struck, turning the world upside down and devastating all lives. First, the temperature rose suddenly, the glaciers melted, and endless floods submerged most of the coastal territory, and only places with higher altitudes survived. Then came the continuous rain, heavy rain, and no sunshine. However, with modern knowledge and infrastructure capabilities, as well as various mythological heritages, most countries managed to survive the disaster. But not long after the rainstorm passed, the sunlight became hotter and the ultraviolet rays became stronger. The surface temperature reaches 50 degrees and a dry period arrives, which is not suitable for the growth and survival of plants and animals. In order to avoid the scorching heat, people had to move underground and build countless underground cities. Just after they settled down, a disease broke out in the underground city. A horrific virus is raging in major underground cities, causing terrible damage at an extremely fast rate. This virus evolves very quickly and not only targets humans, but also other animals and plants are poisoned by it. The alliance of various countries acted quickly, carried out isolation and disinfection, and eliminated most of the crises. Unfortunately, the virus was too terrifying and hundreds of millions of people still died. Major laboratories across the world have mobilized and begun studying the virus. After years of unremitting efforts and research, I finally found a way to control it. After hundreds of years of recuperation, humans are ready to return to the ground. At this time, I found that the ground had long been covered by glaciers and white snow, and the whole world had turned into a world of ice and snow. During this period of time, Qin Mu absorbed and digested most of the power, and his strength reached the point where he could create life and death with a single thought, and he had the great power to create a world at will. The stars change and the days and months pass by quickly. Qin Mu slowly opened his eyes that had been closed for a long time. He saw the stars changing and disappearing, the universe coming into being and ending, and exuding endless pressure. As soon as he thought about it, endless grey fog quickly rushed towards his body like a white bird returning to its nest. The body, which is tens of millions feet long, covers the sky and the sun, like a tall and terrifying demon, standing in the void. At this moment, the universe in the real world seemed to be affected as well, collapsing and destroying bit by bit outside the earth. The void collapsed, the starry sky disappeared, and the light of billions of stars dissipated at this moment. Qin Mu's face was calm as he watched all this happen quietly. The seemingly distant other side of the starry sky is actually just nothingness, and the billions of stars are nothing but dreamlike shadows. He had long discovered that the world was like a cage, and that in the so-called universe, only the solar system near the Earth existed truly. Everything outside the solar system is a curtain of light evolved from nothingness, as if covering the world. When the majestic and terrifying power dispelled all illusions, what appeared was a light curtain as clear as glass and indestructible. The crystal clear light curtain is in an arc shape, covering the Earth like an egg. Qin Mu's tall and huge figure moved, and he raised his arm, which was billions of feet long, and suddenly slapped the nearest mythological world. In an instant, the sky collapsed, the world fell apart, the void twisted, and horrific visions emerged of the heaven and earth being annihilated, the stars exploding, and all things withering. Such a horrifying scene did not move Qin Mu at all. When planning, he had already prepared himself mentally. Even if all lives are destroyed and everything is destroyed, he will become the most outstanding and greatest existence until he breaks out of the cage that traps him. And at the moment the world collapsed, some humans in the real world died instantly. After these humans died, golden light emanated from their bodies and they flew towards the sky. Qin Mu walked steadily into the void, arriving at another mythical world. 1, 2, 3, countless mythological worlds collapsed in Qin Mu's hands, and the laws were broken and destroyed. Similarly, human beings on Earth also perished on a large scale as one mythical world after another was destroyed. After Qin Mu reintegrated countless souls, he already understood the reason. The real world was just as he imagined, a cage that imprisoned them, a hell and grave that trapped their escape. All human beings on Earth have the same roots. Every mythological world represents the inheritance of a mythological civilization. When the gods enter the twilight of the gods, or the immortals and Buddhas enter the last age of the 5 declines of heaven and earth, there will be a great cleansing of heaven and earth. These powerful and immortal beings will be packed up by heaven and earth and thrown into the cage and tomb of the earth, where they will reincarnate forever until they are annihilated. But how could these god-level civilizations just surrender? So they gathered the power of the gods and created a mythological world. Every time an opportunity comes, a person with great potential and good fortune will be sent in. He obtained the mythological world created by the gods and the inheritance therein, trying to break through the void and leave this place. Qin Mu was an accident. He was an alien being born over billions of years. It is equivalent to 50 heavenly ways, and one of them is missing. It is a special creature formed by the gathering of countless extinguished hopes and beliefs. Qin Mu appears to be a human being, but his existence is strange and bizarre, beyond the imagination of most beings in the world. He can ignore most restrictions and blockades and move freely. Unfortunately, the blockade of this place by the heavenly Dao was too strong, and Qin Mu was temporarily unable to break through it, so he had to accumulate strength. Chapter 218. When the mythological world collapsed and the universe was destroyed, all human beings on the earth lost their vitality, leaving only pale corpses. Qin Mu lowered his eyes, his expression calm, slightly opened his thin lips, and took in countless golden lights of human souls into his belly. He raised his eyes, which were as bright as gold, illuminating everything in the world. It was as if he could see through the cage and see the outside world. As his body expanded, his aura also rose steadily, and he stood up again like a sleeping dragon. It swallowed up countless mythological worlds, and under this overwhelming power and momentum, it moved forward fearlessly and rushed to the edge of the cage. Boom! The elephant's sound seemed as if an invisible wave was transmitted in the space, annihilating countless voids. Where the cage was hit, billions of colorful rays of light flickered, and the dense chains were broken, bursting into brilliant light. When the fireworks faded, the cage recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye and was as good as new. Qin Mu was not discouraged when he saw this scene, but continued to criticize it all. The terrifying sound of the collision vibrated and spread in space, and the residual power even spread to billions of miles away. With Qin Mu's unremitting efforts, water dripping through the stone can wear away the stone. The cage changed from a thick and boundless curtain of light to a thin layer of dim color. Qin Mu acted decisively, quickly condensed all the strength in his body, formed an origin, and suddenly rushed out. Snap! A small hole appeared in the light curtain, and countless chains flashing with golden light moved rapidly to repair it. Qin Mu was quick-witted and transformed into a grey mist, escaping at an absolute speed. In the blink of an eye, the sky and the earth changed color, and the world seemed to be turned upside down. Qin Mu looked around and quickly observed the surrounding situation. The land was barren and desolate. Apart from sparse weeds and plants, there were only countless magical beasts roaming around here. Desolate, barbaric, and backward, this is the feeling of Qin Mu. Qin Mu floated in mid-air, and his body returned to human form again. After scanning around, he felt relieved when he found that there was no threat to his life. He believes that he is the most powerful person in the outside world. But when breaking through the cage, too much energy was consumed, so he acted cautiously. Looking down, there were groups of monsters fighting each other. Qin Mu's aura condensed, like a volcanic eruption, covering hundreds of millions of kilometers. In a flash, millions of monsters turned into dry bones, and the rising blood mist was swallowed up by his wide mouth, becoming a tonic for him to restore his strength. It replenished a little energy, but it's just a drop in the bucket. Qin Mu smacked his lips and turned to look around. I don't know where this is, but the west seems to be different. Qin Mu's eyes were deep, with golden light flashing in his pupils. He looked towards the west and murmured. With his current state of mind, he can see through the void and see thousands of miles away at a glance. In an instant, he saw the rising vitality in the west and the breath of living beings lingering, as if there was a civilization. Now that I have just been released from the cage, it is natural for me to familiarize myself with the outside world. Qin Mu stepped into the air and flew away like a shooting star. After a while, a magnificent, tall and majestic city wall came into view. Countless humans, wearing armor and holding various weapons, fought with the monsters to resist the invasion of the monsters. With swords and spears and fierce fighting spirit, they fought off wave after wave of monsters with their mortal bodies. Qin Mu transformed into grey mist again, stretching out his vast body and covering the vast land. The grey fog was too thin and the light in this desolate world was too dim, so most people did not notice it. Even if some people found out, they didn't realize there was anything wrong, because Qin Mu was not targeting living people. Wherever the grey fog passed, all information was collected like a flood tide and poured into Qin Mu's mind. The bodies of the dead monsters and warriors dried up and decayed at an extremely fast speed, turning into a pile of lifeless bones. While Qin Mu was recovering from his injuries, he checked the information or power distribution of this world. From the souls of the dead warriors, we learned that they were all subordinate servants of a god of war. They followed the god of war to guard this demonic realm and prevent monsters from invading the upper world. This world is divided into 3 layers. This place is the lowest layer of hell, and the middle is where mortal creatures live. And at the top is the most precious and sacred abode of the gods in the world. In the hearts of the warriors, as long as they fight bravely and dedicate everything to the gods, they will be able to become heroic spirits after death and enter the realm of gods to enjoy eternal joy. Qin Mu did not comment on this fraud because he had seen too much of it in those mythological worlds. A lie told by a god who is high above and looks down upon the world can drive ordinary people crazy. But how many people can truly fulfill their promise and become gods? After several months, the god of war guarding the demon realm seemed to have discovered some clues and began to look for traces and signs everywhere. But Qin Mu was omnipresent and omniscient, so he directly ambushed the god and replaced him with a dead one. After gaining the status of god of war, Qin Mu released the human soul consciousness on earth. Therefore, because of him, all living things on the earth became extinct, but their souls were still taken away by him for resurrection. He spent some time creating a blood pool and threw the players' souls into it. Several white human bodies floated out of the blood pool. The blood pool is constructed using the essence of Warcraft and is very simple. In this real world, he planned to do something more interesting, which was to recreate the 4th disaster. This time they are not being used as tools, but they will be resurrected and used to conquer the world. Not long after, a prosperous scene appeared in this desolate demonic realm. The monsters that used to gather in large groups have become much sparser, and have been replaced by castle buildings made of stones. Players accept missions, form teams to hunt monsters, open up wasteland, plant plants, and establish various forces of all sizes. This situation lasted for several decades until it was discovered by the fleeing gods. Gods have eternal life and high status, so there may be some with great ambitions among them. This god looks embarrassed, but he is actually very powerful. He fought with the God King and was driven out of the God realm. After discovering the situation here, he attempted to seize the power and status that controlled this place. How could Qin Mu tolerate such a thing? Of course he gave it to him directly. After the god got the player's infrastructure system, he taught him how to use it with the help of the intelligent system of Qin Mu's incarnation. Thousands of years later, Qin Mu woke up from his slumber and looked at the world. Players were already spread all over the world. The god realm fell under the players' fearless attacks and became the territory of the new god king. Qin Mu smiled slightly and murmured, "Yes, the food is ripe, and my strength can be restored a little." As soon as he finished speaking, countless players and their descendants exploded and died, turning into a surging blood mist that rushed towards Qin Mu's mouth. The sky and the earth changed color, the sun and the moon disappeared, and the whole world fell into endless scarlet. The god king's eyes were bloodshot, and in the midst of disbelief, he disappeared from the world along with the endless blood mist. Qin Mu hit saturation, his posture was upright, and his face was flawless. He stood at the top of the world, looking towards the distant other side of the world. Across the endless chaos, what came into view was a new world. The world is big and vibrant, with many races, many strong people, and a majestic atmosphere. Qin Mu collected the souls of the players, emptied their memories, implanted false memories, and headed for a new world again. End of story. It's a mess, so leave it at that. There's no point in continuing like this. 8 out of 10 reviews are negative, and I haven't constructed a good story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.